excited to have you here with us today for another CybHER Conversation. CybHER is out of Dakota State University in Madison, South Dakota. And we have our amazing co-founders with us, Drs. Ashley Podorotsky and Pam Rowland, who are two of the faculty members, and Ashley is also the Associate Dean of the Beacom College of Computer and Cyber Sciences there. And with me, we also have Kanthi Narokonda, who is the Chief of Operations for CybHER. I am Katie Shuck, the Chief of Strategy for CybHER, and we are so excited to have everybody here, whether this is your first time or you've been coming all throughout the summer. We hope you are enjoying getting back to school and again, joining us for these programs. So just a quick reminder, if you do have questions during the program, you can ask them via the Q&A that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. Also, Kanthi will be facilitating those questions later on. And now, I'm sorry, I got sidetracked by my echo here. I really want to introduce our speaker today, Chloé Messdaghi, who is an amazing cybersecurity advocate. She is the Vice President of Strategy for Point3 Security. She has founded so many women's security groups. She is changing the face of what a hacker looks like, as well as the definition of a hacker. And I know that you are going to be inspired by her. So Chloé, I am going to let you take it away.
Excellent. Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm excited to answer any questions that you guys bring my way.
You kind of tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got into cybersecurity and what you do too.
Sure. Okay, so I don't know how far back to go here, but before I went to cybersecurity, I also call it InfoSec, by the way. But before I went into it, I was doing management consulting for nonprofits and startups that were in tech. So basically I would oversee how companies can get better and organizations can be better while they're low on resources such as like funds and people and whatnot. And I absolutely loved it, but I also missed being in an office space, because as a management consultant, you're traveling quite often, you're going project to project, and it can be getting kind of lonely at times. So what I did was that I started letting people know I was looking for work, and a recruiter contacted me saying, how about a cybersecurity company? I'm like, sure, why not? So I went in marketing management, and what ended up happening was, like, the first 2 weeks, I was wondering, how come there's hardly any women in here? Because usually the companies that I worked with previously in organizations, it was usually like 50% women. And suddenly I saw like hardly any women. So I wondered if this was an industry situation. So then I started researching and I realized, oh wait, it's only 11% of women are in this field. And that's when I basically was thinking, okay, that's gotta change. And so later, I think a year later, I partnered up with Tanya Janka and created Women of Security, also known as WoSEC. And we have chapters all over the world, and basically women get to meet each other, network and intermingle with each other and have each other support and back. Because when there's not too many people that look like you in the space, it can be very hard sometimes. And so it's so important is to have support groups that have your back and also could be there to cheer you on too. And then also, I realized that only 4% of hackers around the world are identified as women. And so that was another hard moment, because I realized, wow, 4%, that's really small. That needs to change. So then I created another group, but this is a group for technical folks, or those that are basically hackers at all levels that are underrepresented by their genders are part of this group. And so we've now been around for a little bit over a year. We have over 1,000 members all around the world, and we're all hackers at all different levels, and red team, blue team, and purple team.
That is, I think, just a fascinating thing. Kanthi, I am going to let you go ahead and take it away. I know you've got some questions there for you. I see one in the Q&A already. So take it away, Kanthi.
So Chloé, those are quite some groups you founded. I love it. I love it. And I've heard of women only making up like 11% when I first looked at it, but now it's gone up to 20% of the cybersec world. But to think that there's only 4% of people that identify as women that are hackers, it's such a small number. And I'm like, I guess, but even now, like even today, when people ask me, hey, what's your major? And I tell them cybersecurity, they're like, oh, so you're a hacker. I'm like, no, I'm not. There's so many different things besides hacking and cybersecurity, but I guess the negative stereotypes about hackers haven't like totally gone away. It's still a struggle. So there are a few questions we have. So the first one we have from Katie's daughter. She asks, what does a hacker do?
Sure. So a hacker basically tries to find, they're very curious individuals, and we all hack to a certain degree. That's how I like to look at it. So think of it as, for example, you're given a puzzle to figure out, and it gives you the instructions of how to get through this puzzle. However, you also realize, oh wait, if I take it a different angle, I can actually finish this puzzle a lot faster. That's basically what a hacker does. It's looking for loopholes or looking for things that with their curiosity that they can see can be improved on most of the time. So we find holes, in other words, or we try to fix the holes. We have to predict these things ahead of time so then we can keep everyone safe. So hackers themselves, I know that in the press or in media or in movies or in TV shows, when you hear hacker, you think of this dark hooded figure with a hoodie on, sometimes a ski mask, and all you see is their eyes. But that's actually an attacker. So an attacker is someone who's doing something that's bad. So doing something that we would say malicious, meaning they're taking advantage of a situation, a vulnerability, and making money off of it usually. And so that's the thing that is separates between an attacker and a hacker. A hacker is the everyday hero who's patching vulnerabilities so you don't have you at risk. Also, companies don't have risks, that your privacy and data is kept in a safe way. But we're also there to help find the vulnerabilities before the attackers do. So companies are aware of it, so then they're able to fix it, so then it keeps you and your loved ones safe.
Thank you for that. We actually have another question that says, how would you define the word hacker? So you answered two questions at the same time.
Excellent.
So with InfoSec comes different teams, right? So we have red, blue, purple. Which team do you prefer to be on?
That's a good question. So how I always frame a red team, blue team, and a purple team is a red teamer is very curious to see how far does the hole go. In other words, you want to find everything possible in the highest details of anything that's missing, and which can put someone at a weakness. And then there's the blue teamers, which are there to predict such vulnerabilities out there, but also to fix them as soon as possible, so then it protects them. Purple teamers do a little bit of both, or they're a fixer, and at the same time they're a searcher. And I think it has a lot to do with every time someone asks me, so which field should I go into? I always say first go into purple teaming, because it gives you a better idea of what you might be better at or your strengths are. But also, if you want to protect people, you have to know how each side thinks. How does a red teamer think? How do they process information? What are the techniques and tools that they use? And as blue teamers, what are the tools and techniques that you use to be able to predict and also to patch that vulnerability? So those are the two things, is that depending on like who you are, what you think you're really good at, that kind of gives you a good idea of where you can stand. But I always tell people, try going purple team before you can figure out if you want to be red team or blue team, or better yet, just be a purple teamer. There's a wonderful person named Tanya Janka who does a lot of these online courses for free around purple teaming. So you can have a good idea of how does purple teamers think, what do they use? But it's a really great strength to have, to be able to see both sides. And also, I think purple team, you have to also use a lot of empathy too, to understand both sides of the situation.
I love it. Nobody has ever explained it quite that way, so I love it. So earlier when you said only 4% of people or of hackers identify as women, someone asked the question, how or where did you find that statistic?
Right. So there was a Bug Crowd report. I think it was in 2018 or 2019. And the statistic basically came out that those that they researched was only 4% identify as women. Now, the thing to note is that number might be actually higher. The only reason that it is not as high as we would hope for is because one, when you're a hacker and a woman, it can be very hard to be the only one in your group, virtual group. So you try to cover up your name. So it'd be something anonymous, or it could be something masculine. So people don't see you for who you are and what gender you are. Instead, they see you as what you're doing instead. And I think that's the thing, is covering up your name is a way for people to kind of reduce their biases against you, so you can do what you want to do and participate just as well without your gender being at the upfront of it.
It's quite common, I would say. I mean, I would think, not I would say, I would think. So we have another question from Katie's daughter. So what's your favorite part of your job?
Oh, okay. I think my favorite part of my job is being able to talk to people like you guys. That's my favorite thing, giving talks, talking to the press to let them know about the situations that we're in, to push more for rights for hackers, also to push for better diversity and inclusion techniques, and also to keep pushing out that we haven't fixed things yet, and we have to keep reminding ourselves that nothing is fixed quite yet, and we have to do our best as possible as human beings to be there for each other and protect one another.
As part of your work, then, do you get to travel a lot, or at least pre-COVID?
Yeah, I used to travel, I think, almost every week or every other week. I would probably attend about 1 to 3 conferences per week. So most of the time was a lot of traveling, and this year was going to be a lot of traveling. But because of COVID, now it's all virtual. But the greatest thing about it is that you get to be everywhere and wherever you are. And that's the thing that's different, is that I could do a conference in Turkey, and 1 hour later, I could do a conference in South Africa, and 2 hours later, I could do one in Singapore without leaving my office. But I'm able to touch on all those different groups, and so people can learn and get to see and hear the new things that are happening in our field. So, which is fantastic in many ways.
So then do you like doing the virtual conferences as opposed to being present there then?
I would say it has its pluses and minuses. I miss seeing my friends and colleagues in person, of course. I miss exploring different cultures when traveling and getting to basically expand my knowledge of how the world is. And I miss those, but I understand that actually in many ways, virtual conferences is a better practice of inclusion. And the reason for that is that anyone can attend usually. Usually it doesn't cost money. Sometimes conferences can be so expensive to attend, and not everyone has that ability to do that and also take time off to go to a conference. But now they have that ability to attend these conferences and network within the chat rooms to try to find something good for them. So I think virtual conferences, I hope that we learn from this year, is to do a 50-50 split, where you have something that's virtual, you also have one that's in person, so then we can kind of share more knowledge with each other and kind of network a little bit better than we have in the past.
True. There's this one conference, it's called WeAreHackerz, Women in Cybersecurity. And this year, I think they had about upwards of 7,000 people registered because they went virtual. Normally, they only have a cap at 1,500, but they were able to expand to such a huge number because it was virtual. And they were like, okay, we got to reach to so many people, and it's awesome.
Yep.
So, yeah. So what is your work like on a daily basis?
Okay, so what I first do is I tend to wake up about 8:15 a.m. if I'm lucky. There's sometimes where I'm just like, I just want to keep pressing the snooze button, but it doesn't mean I dislike my life or anything. Because a lot of times people, when they snooze the button, it's like, oh my God, I don't want to go to work or school. That's not what's going on for me. I'm just like, oh, I'm tired because I'm doing too much. But it starts at about 8:15. I take my dogs out for a walk. And then basically I get ready for my first calls. They start at 9 a.m. And usually I have back-to-back calls in the morning until about 1 p.m. Pacific time, because the company I work for, we're on the East Coast and I'm in San Francisco. So I have to make sure that I can also be there for my colleagues. Usually around afterwards, I'm able to work on projects. So that could be anything from coming up with strategies to help the company grow, to any written content that I need to do. This could also be recordings for webinars and podcasts or doing conferences. And usually that goes on until about 5 or 6 p.m. every day. But usually I'm doing some sort of talk or conference or podcast at least about 3 times a week would be the lowest amount. There's been times where I've had like 12 in a week.
So then we would have to ask you like months in advance if we wanted to have you on a podcast then.
No, I always find time. I always find time for people.
We love that. We love that. So because you mentioned the podcast, I was reading your bio earlier and I saw that there's a mention of something called the Hacker Book Club.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the Hackers Book Club, basically what I noticed was that a lot of people in our hacker community, they write books about our community. And the thing is, as a community, we're very tight knit. We like to help and support each other. We're there to protect each other too. We have each other's back. And it's really weird because I don't really see that too much in other industries, but we have each other's back. And so what happens is when there's a hacker in the community that writes a book, the community needs to know about it and can read it. And the great thing about it is that because we're so closely knit together, I have the authors attend our meetings. Also, those are mentioned in the book. They make guest appearances. So we do a new book every month. And sometimes it's not written by someone in the hacker community, but it's someone who has a deep appreciation for the hacker community and has worked in the hacker community. They themselves are not a hacker, which is always okay. Anytime anyone wants to show the hacker community who we are to the world, we love it, as long as it's true and honest. So we always have these events and it's great. We just finished one, Tribe of Hackers, the Red Team Edition. And we had about 10 guests yesterday that were mentioned in the book. So 10 hackers that are pretty well known came on and people could ask any questions that they had, along with the author, Marcus Carey also attended.
That sounds wonderful. So can anybody join the book club, or do you have a preference for who can join the book club?
Yeah, you just have to be on Goodreads. That's pretty much it. We post all the information on Goodreads, so it's best to have an account with Goodreads to be able to be on top of it and to get your invite. And you just join. It's a public group.
Okay, that's
Okay.
lovely. I love it. So what's the weirdest thing you've heard that was hacked?
Weirdest thing. Oh, that's a good question.
You must have like a ton of stories.
I mean, you hear a lot of the stories
know.
about how cars are hacked, and those are
Oh
pretty
my God,
amazing.
those are scary.
Well, the thing is that a lot of cars, they have Bluetooth enabled, and that always makes it into an interesting situation. But I would say for me, I tend to focus more on like phishing. And the reason for that is because this year we've seen an increase in phishing. And for those that don't know what phishing is, it's basically when an attacker sends an email pretending to be someone or represent a certain company. And within it, there's a link. And that link is embedded with something that's malicious, something that can hurt you in many ways by basically either encrypting your information and also keeping an eye on you and your privacy and your data as well without your knowledge. And so phishing attacks are really high right now this year because COVID-19 is happening, and with COVID-19, we have communication issues across companies. So we don't have the ability to check in and make sure that, say, for example, that email that was sent from Stu is actually from Stu. Instead, we have to rely on Slack or emails. And that's a whole different ballpark, something that we're not quite used to quite yet. And that puts us at a huge risk a lot of the times.
So along the same lines, then what's the most common hack?
Oh, for sure. It depends. It depends on what type of security, but I would say the most common one or easiest one to pick up if you're trying to see whether or not your friends and family or your team, your security team is practicing, I guess, good security hygiene is by sending them emails. Not putting a malicious link in there, of course, but put a tracker on the link. So what you can do is see how many people clicked on it, who clicked on it, to see if you can actually phish your own family and friends. But of course, I always recommend if you're going to do something like that, first talk to one of your parents to ask for permission. Like, don't do that to your parents without, or guardians, without letting one of them know that you're doing that. And that's always the thing. You don't ever want to do that without permission. And that's the first thing that you learn as a hacker, is to make sure that you're never seen as an attacker. You always ask for permission. And if you get permission and it's granted for you, then you're good to go. But if you don't have permission to do it, then you're doing something that isn't good. And it's not good behavior, so then that makes you into a bad actor. So don't do it.
So because you do so much talking, like you mentioned, you go to conferences, you do podcasts and stuff. We have a question about that.
Okay.
Are you ever nervous to talk to the press? And were you ever a nervous speaker?
So I would say that I'm not a nervous speaker. What happens is, like, I get on stage to give a talk and I just kind of get in the scene and the mood, I guess. I think for me, it depends on different things. Like, say if I were to go on stage and start singing, I have a deep fear of that. So I'm not going to go on stage and sing. And when it comes to karaoke, I'm not going to be. I would say that one of the best ways to practice getting up and speaking is to feel first comfortable in what you're trying to share. Memorizing everything is never going to be helpful, in a sense that you will keep thinking, I got to make sure I mention this. I got to make sure I mention this. And that can take away from being present to your audience. And so I always say, like, if you want to practice giving talks, do talks that you love. Talk about something you love, like why you love cats or dogs. So like, things like that, things that are very low key, something that you feel comfortable talking about. That's what it is. Now, if I were to go up on a stage and give a talk about the latest tool on a blue teamer's team, I'm going to be stressing out and I'm going to feel very anxious and I'm going to feel very shy because I don't know those things. And so that's the thing that's different, is it's always okay and comfortable to get up and talk if it's something that you're aware of and you know of, you have that knowledge, you feel comfortable talking about it at any time of the day, even if you're half awake, then that's good. But if it's something like you need to look into it and read about it and everything, you don't feel comfortable talking about it, then it's a no-go.
So you mentioned you had dogs.
Yes.
So we have a question about that. How many dogs do you have?
I have 2 Shiba Inus. I have Sherlock, who's about a little bit over 2 years old. She is a red Shiba. So the ones that look like foxes that you see on Instagram, that's the dog I have. And then I have Luna, who just turned 6 months old yesterday. And she is a black and tan Shiba. So she looks kind of like a husky or like a miniature bear in a sense. But they're very cute and adorable and they love each other so much. It's very cute.
That's so cute. So as part of your work, do you use a coding language? And if so, which one do you prefer to use?
Believe it or not, I am one of those hackers that doesn't know how to code. But and that's one of the things, is that even the best people that are hackers and whatnot, Some of them don't know code at all. It's just more like asking questions of what you're reading and then Google searching most of the time. That's usually what it is about. There's also a platform that we tend to use often called Burp Suite. This allows you to kind of find vulnerabilities without really knowing too much coding. So that's another thing. So coding is important to know. I think a lot of times Python is really useful. It's more useful to know how to code in different languages. Focus on one in particular, so that's your strength, and then you can learn other ones afterwards, but it's to learn one completely as much as possible. And if you're gonna pick a coding language, I would recommend probably, if you want to learn Python, Python would be a good one to learn. But yeah, know the basics of coding and you'll be okay at the end of the day.
I kind of feel you. I'm not a coder as well. I couldn't code if my life depended on it. I was so bad at it. Still am. So you said all you gotta do is ask the questions. So then do you need to ask like a lot of questions when you're working on that then?
So if it's something I don't know, I usually Google search it and I read everything I can about it. But if I still have lingering questions that Google can't give to me, I usually have a few people in top of my head that I know their specialties in that area, and I tend to ask them. And that's the one thing I think a main takeaway is that if you want to ever go far in life, you have to ask the questions and you have to be okay with asking questions, because that's how people like get to where they want to go in their life, is by asking the questions.
So what advice would you give to people to keep themselves secure online then?
Okay. There's this thing called a password manager. If you don't have it, your parents don't have it, have a sit down talk with them. It's time for a password manager. That's the first one. Second thing is to make sure you have 2FA. 2FA is your authentication. So making sure that when you type in your password, it is you who is trying to get into your account. And this could be through a text message, this could be by an email, this could be through an application. And it's really important to have that, because it can be quite easy to get into someone's account by just figuring out their password. So this gives you an extra layer of security and safety. Make sure your passwords are more than 30 characters. That's another important thing. I always say make sure you mix up the characters. And the good news about a password manager is that it can mix up. So it's a little bit better in some ways, because it's all mixed up with numbers and letters and symbols, and that makes it very easy for you to have that extra feeling of safety. And then the other thing is, if you ever get a text message or an email and there's a link in it, don't click on it. Just never click on a link, just period. What you can do is first find out if the person actually sent it to you. If it's someone that you know, just double check, making sure that they actually sent that email to you or that text message to you. So always have another platform to communicate whoever you talk to. So you can always verify. And this is the same thing with attachments. So anytime someone attaches a document or a PDF, you also want to be aware of that. But the one thing to note is that attackers are a little bit more aware that you're 3 times more likely to click on a link on a smaller screen. So how they will probably try to like connect with you, it could be through your social media. It could be through SMS messages on your phone, so your text messages. So be very careful. The other thing I would say lastly is applications. How many applications do you have on your phone? How often do you use those applications? Also keeping up to date. So anytime there is a update on your phone or on your computer or whatnot, make sure you update it immediately. Or also applications. Anytime that there's an app that needs an update, don't push it away, just do it immediately. And there's a reason for that. The reason that those basically those updates are happening is because they are also pushing out patches that protect you from vulnerabilities. So then you have that extra layer of from an attacker that's trying to get into your phone. And if anyone has ever asked you like, well, I mean, it's not like we really need to care how long our password is, or, reuse the same password. Never reuse the same password, by the way. But if you do something like that, it's really important to note is that everyone can become a victim always when it comes to attacks. They don't always target you individually. They do more like group targeting, where they'll send a mass amount of messages to you because they purchased something online which had your information. So it's really important is to always double check before you click on a link or if you open any attachment.
That was such good advice. Such good advice. You mentioned password managers. Do you have a favorite password manager application?
I would say, so the one that's usually highly recommended is 1Password. 1Password tends to be recommended the most, I would say. There's another one in particular, but from LastPass is another one that people use. So those are the two big ones. But there are free ones too. There's one called KeePass. It's KEE Pass. That one's actually free. So it's a free one. So if you don't want to pay for a password manager like 1Password or any others, that one is actually free that you can utilize, and developers use it quite often too.
Awesome. We have quite a few questions left, but unfortunately we're out of time. So I will ask you one last question and then we will turn it over to Katie. So what advice do you have for a high schooler or a middle schooler who is interested in this space and hacking and stuff?
Find a friend. Honestly, find a friend, and also form a club if you have to. I think the one thing that would have helped me at the very beginning when I entered cybersecurity was to be around other people that were like me. Because my first year, I didn't know that there was anyone who was like me, that looked like me, that was doing the things that I was doing. So it's really good and important is to always surround yourself with people that are going to encourage you and be there for you. And also it's kind of fun to create your own club. I'm not going to lie. I've created quite a bit of different clubs. But it's a lot of fun to do so because you have the support network of people that really care for each other. And that's what we need more in the world, I feel like, is more of that support from one another. And don't give up.
That is excellent advice. Yes, I think we can all use friends, but especially in this community. So thank you. Now I am launching a poll for all of our participants to go ahead and fill out. And we want to invite you back to next week's CybHER Conversation, where we have the Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI, I have to read this off my notes here, Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI Cyber Division Cyber Capabilities Branch, Val Caulfield, joining us. And so we are super excited to have her joining us. We are so very thankful for Chloe joining us today and sharing with her about her work and her role in changing what a hacker is. Always ask for permission. Big takeaway, and I'm telling that especially to the people I know on this call. But we are so thankful for you coming on and joining us, and we hope that everybody has a great day. You can always follow us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and subscribe to our online learning channel on YouTube. So thank you, and we look forward to seeing everybody again soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.